Hello, gentle marketers. Welcome to the Gentle Business Revolution podcast. I'm back with the third part of our series around the 7 chakras and how they relate to gentle marketing. So I have Lisa Peterson with me for this third conversation. And in this part, we're going to be discussing the solar plexus and the heart chakra. In case you missed the first episode the first 2 episodes on the root and the sacral chakra, you can go over to sarahzenacroce.com/Lisa, that's Lesa, and find the previous episodes there, and also just kind of bookmark that page because I'll also be posting the next ones. So all 7, or it's not exactly 7, but all of the chakra episodes will be in there, as well as the visuals that we refer to and the other links, as, for example, my Gentle Confidence mini course that you can also go to sarahzenacroce.com/gentle confidence, especially today as we're talking about the solar plexus. It definitely has to do with confidence, and we also talk about the imposter syndrome and power and all of that good stuff. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Lisa Peterson. All right, we're back with Lisa Peterson. So good to have you again. Hi, Lisa.
I am so happy to be back.
So this is the third part of our series around the 7 chakras and how they relate to gentle marketing. And today we want to talk about the solar plexus and the heart chakra. Let's see if we can fit them into one episode. Let's see how that goes.
Awesome.
Right. So just in case you missed the previous episodes on the root and the sacral, you can go over to sarahzenacroce.com/Lisa, that's Leisa, and you'll find the replays there. So yeah, let's get started with the solar plexus. Maybe you can start, and again, like we did with the previous 2, where it's situated and kind of what are the topics that come up for that.
Yeah. So the solar plexus are, here above the belly button. They represent how powerful we feel in the world, how powerful we feel in our business, which is a big deal. And I think whenever we talk about power, it's good to just mention that this is not the same thing as force or manipulation or control. That is not what we're trying to have more of. We are trying to be able to feel like we are in our own sense of power in everything that we do. And what is interesting about this one is that we often do not feel comfortable stepping into the authority position in our business. So we start the business and we kind of hide in one way or another behind maybe the thing that, like for me, I decided if I'm going to start a business, who am I? I'm going to build a brand that's not around my name. I'm going to call it Wealth Clinic. So that's an example of not really feeling your power, because I was like, that word is more powerful than I am. That's what I thought early on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there was a huge discussion a few years ago around this idea of not calling your business the name, your personal name. And so there was back and forth, the gang who was like all for it. And then the other ones who were like, no, you should never do that. I think mainly because they were saying, well, once you own something like a topic or a niche, right, then you can't change. But there's been so many examples in the online world where we see that that's not true. I'm thinking of Mari Smith, who was kind of like the Facebook queen, right? It's not like she's stuck there. She went on and did so many other things with her business, and everybody still remembers, her name. So I think she really showed that you can step into your power and use your name and then, pivot and do whatever you feel good with. It's not like you're going to be stuck in a certain thing. For me, the same with LinkedIn. yeah, that's kind of where I built my authority and expertise, but I don't feel like I'm stuck there now, right?
Totally. The thing about this when it pertains to business, and I think the example of Marie is very appropriate, because when we know who we're serving, like we talked about in the sacral chakra, when we know that really, really well, we start to become tuned into who is that person? How can I help them? What are the solutions that I'm offering? And we look out into the world and we say, well, what is the world's greatest needs as it pertains to this particular group of people?
Mm-hmm.
And what is it that I can do to help them? And then immediately we start to create highly targeted programs and offerings that serve those folks. And the more we lean into it, the more we feel the power, because we're like, wow, there's so much to be said about focus. You and I are both off the experience of writing a book. And we can both easily speak to the fact that when you spend a lot of time working on something and you really start to know it better than anybody else in the world, you feel more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a beautiful way. And like, gosh, I can actually help people. And when we don't become really focused and targeted in certain areas of subject matter, we aren't the most helpful person to people. It's because of the years and the time and the energy that we devote to mastering things that we become really, really helpful to people. I mean, that's a no-brainer, but I think that in the business, sometimes we see these people out there, and Sarah, I know you write about this in your book. It's like, they're all hype. They literally are 23 years old. They're making millions of dollars. I don't know how, because I don't know how they could have enough experience in the thing that they're selling to help people. But they're so good at Instagram photos and making it look like they are just at the top of their game. They make a lot of money, or at least they show the appearance that they're making a lot of money. That is not power. That is something I don't even know what it is, honestly. I don't waste time thinking about it, except that I know that that's not me. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to make a really big difference and not rely on hype to get people's attention.
Yeah, it's almost like an abuse of power in a way, right? Because I don't know if they feel powerful, but it sure seems to the outside as if they were. And so what I wrote about in the book is like one of these examples. And when you dig into it, you're right. You don't really understand what actually what are they offering. And the reason for that is that they're offering dreams, like they're selling dreams. There's no concrete thing because they're selling a dream, right? And so that's why anyway, we're going off track, but don't get me started on these guys, because it's just like, oh my God, how could they sell a dream and, make millions of dollars? But so to get back to this idea of power, again, it reminds me of confidence. It reminds me also, I guess, a little bit of the imposter syndrome. So what would you say to someone who is feeling a lack of power, or is feeling like they're maybe giving their power away, but they actually do have all this knowledge, and they do have a business or a service that they should be offering?
So I think that there's a big turning point for most people. It's not like you just snap your fingers and you are like, I don't have imposter syndrome anymore. I feel powerful. So what I focus on, as you know, is very practical things that can actually begin to turn the tide in the direction you want to go. One example I can give you that I did in my business that was a game changer before I wrote my books is I could tell that there were these themes. This is actually even before the chakras came into my work. I knew that there were 7 patterns of things that I noticed people struggling with when it came to money. And at that time, I was really focused on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so what I did was I said, I had already written some, lead magnets and other stuff and small books. And I was like, what if I write an ebook about like one page on each of these 7 things that I'm playing with? And I interview people and then I put it into this like ebook. And at the time it was like 7 things that entrepreneurs struggle with the most, something like that, or self-sabotage the most. And when I dove into those 7 things, and I kept it to one page, because you guys, like, we can like spend way too much time on this. And I knew that I would go down the rabbit hole if I wasn't careful. So I wrote one page on each of these things after some research and conversations. And all of a sudden, I realized that there was a body of information here for me to go deeper, even deeper in. But even having that sense of completion that, oh my gosh, I have a unique point of view. I have something that is pretty valuable here that I want to spend more time on. And that began coming out of the, I don't have anything to offer the world, to, wait a minute, maybe there's something here that I want to spend more time with. And I got that information out to the world, and I could see if people were actually coming to download it, which gave me confidence that I was on the right track.
I like that, because that also kind of brings up the P of partnership in the gentle marketing model, where you kind of brought in other experts in order, to bring in their expertise to level your own expertise up, but all doing it in this open way. And then you realized, wait a minute, okay, they bring in this kind of expertise. Mine is actually kind of different. I have this unique approach. And so, but you probably wouldn't have seen that if you didn't bring in the others, right? You had to actually put yourself out there and say, I'm doing this. Are you participating? And that's how, you then kind of find your own little niche and your difference.
That's one of the reasons why I like summits when we're first starting out in business so much, because the exact thing you're talking about, you get the opportunity to go out. And in the beginning, I was like, I don't know what I can offer people. I didn't know myself well enough. I didn't know how I could, be coaching people. And I started doing those interviews. And at first it was like just something I was interested in, which was, what fear did you have to overcome to stay in business and have success? And in hearing all these business owners talk about that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually pretty good at overcoming fear. I didn't know that, maybe I could help people do that. Mm-hmm. So yes, partnership.
There's, always referring back to your diagnostic map, which is on the page, also sarahsinacroce.com/Lisa. In the column under awareness, you're saying afraid of self-discipline. So explain that to us.
Yeah. So think about the summit, think about the ebook, think about the process of writing a book. All of those require discipline. They require focus. They require commitment. They require us to go above and beyond sitting on the couch watching Netflix every night. Like, I mean, when I wrote my book, and I'd love to hear from you what you did, I was waking up at 3:30 in the morning and writing for 2 or 3 hours before I started my full day of coaching. That was what I had to do to commit and focus. And you don't become a specialist or a master or someone who makes a huge difference in the lives of others until you spend that time to get really hyper-focused in what you're doing.
I agree to a certain point. So the specialty, definitely. I also believe in miracles and, leaps of energy and all that. So I'm not so much a believer of, you got to pay your dues anymore. Even though for something like writing a book or, really knowing your topic, obviously you're going to put the time. There's just no shortcut. I'm just saying, I don't know if there's this, I can't remember who said the 10,000 hours rule. I'm not sure you have to spend 10,000 hours anymore, honestly, because there's so much, fast track information out there as well that you can really, if you put your mind to it, and yes, you got to put in time, but maybe not this intimidating amount. Like you said, 1 or 2 hours per day, and you can write a book. That's what I did. I did 1 hour every day, and it, didn't take me a year. So I think sometimes it's too intimidating for people to think, oh my God, 10,000 hours. No, you can, but where I totally agree is the discipline. Oh my God, you have to just be so disciplined. And we're totally in the doing here, right? Again,
yeah, that power chakra. Yes.
Yang oriented chakra. And, I think maybe that's also a good transition to then the opposite, which is the gentleness. So, how can we be so powerful, be so self-disciplined, and maybe even disciplined with others, but still be gentle?
Yeah. Something that's coming to mind right now that I've been thinking about a lot is I did put in all that work, and I have worked very hard over the past 6.5 years in my business to get to where it's at. But part of the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to work at that intensity forever. It's just not sustainable. And I think that I wouldn't have done all that hard work if I thought that's all that continued forever. It was only going to be just this, slogging through and mastering and all of that. So I think that there is always a spirit, at least in my creation phases, which is what I would call this. There's a spirit of, I do know that this is leading to something that has more being than doing. Mm-hmm. And that I'm inviting that again and again. And one example of how that's showing up right now is I don't have a PR person. It's me, myself, and I. I had some PR help from the publisher at first, but the requests are coming in so fast for PR to, be on podcasts or radio programs or all these crazy things that I could never do, make happen. They're happening because of the seeds that have been planted. And I think that when we know that that's possible for us, then it gives those moments of when we're kind of, head down, working on something that's really important to us. And by the way, when we're creating, it's coming from a place of passion, not from a place of oh, this is horrible. There are those moments, but more often than not, it's pouring through you. But because you got focused and you committed the time, you're inviting the being to come through because the structure is there to create such beautiful stuff. So I'm all over the map, but does any of that help?
Yeah, no, I think it's really also important to realize where we're at in our business, right? And so you said you're 6 years in, but you're still establishing, growing, and putting down these foundations. And for me, it's kind of that all over again because I'm pivoting and kind of doing it again. And maybe it's also because I'm doing it again and I've made, I wouldn't call them mistakes, but I built a business maybe the hard way the first time around that I just don't even want to go there anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, the importance is much more on how can I do this the gentle way, with being gentle with myself, using obviously all the things that I've learned about marketing and business from the past, but really only using the tools that that feel good to me, and that where I know that I don't have to give up on other things that I do also appreciate, like, the yoga and the time to myself. I think it's always this game that we're playing between time in the business and then time for ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, to get back to this conversation about, gentle and fierce, like I sometimes refer to it, is like this self-discipline, there's very strong beliefs also I believe that a business can be built with joy. And
Mhm.
then whenever you remind yourself of that, that kind of builds boundaries or gives you boundaries, because then you just know, oh, these things won't work for me. So I think it's not a contradiction to be powerful and gentle at the same time.
I think it's so good too that when we are first starting out in business, we're still learning about where and when are we at our best.
Mm-hmm.
And until we see ourselves at our worst, it's hard to know what our best really is. And
Right.
so I just think now, like I'm working on a new project and I can approach it from this very driven, fierce approach. But I know that my work isn't going to be the best work if I approach it that way, because I've done that so many times. So what I do is I'll get into the mode of like, okay, time to create. I'll remind myself that there's two ways to go about this. One is going to be in joy, and one is going to be in this like fierce, driven energy. And I'm not going to be happy with the outcome if I choose, the fierce. I'm only going to be happy with the outcome when I'm able to allow the joy to flow through it.
Yeah, it just seems like there's no, like one answer. It's really this dance between the doing, the self-discipline, the power, and the joy and the lightness and the laughter and all of that. So it's it's a journey. What would you say though, like if you think now about this power plexus, like how did it happen that energy got stuck there? Like what kind of experiences do people have who don't have that self-discipline, who don't, have that power to bring to their work?
What I talk about in my book is that many of us have been, we'll call victim to over authority, over management, over control. And especially you and I, we're free spirits at a core part of our being. I think everybody is, but we're in touch with that. And when you get from a young age, a lot of control around don't do that, don't be that, don't act that way, you're too big, you're too loud, all of those things, those diminish the sense of like it being good to be powerful.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, on top of that is the whole female and male conversation, I assume, right? Like, let's not even go there, but I can just imagine that for a lot of women, that's a topic as well. How can I be powerful in a world that's dominated by men, and so that's a whole other conversation that goes into that solar plexus chakra as well.
Most definitely. And this has been for many of us years and years and years of work to break free of it, especially for me, a very dominant father with a big anger temper problem that just really messed up my understanding of who I am and how I could express myself. Which, also comes into the throat chakra, right? So root, solar plexus, and throat are the masculine chakras. And so this is where many of us have some work. Many of us women have some extra work to do because there has been oppression at some place or another.
Yeah, it's interesting. The throat is then where we put that outside, right? First it's inside, and then expressing that into the world and standing up for what we believe and all of that. Yeah, it's fascinating. Any last words regarding the power chakra before we move on to the heart chakra?
I think just embracing the power of you, and the more you get to know that, the more you play with it, the more you try things that don't feel right, then the more you find your balanced center, which is what all of these are encouraging you to help you do.
One thing that just came up when you mentioned that is for me, it was this idea of the mind versus the heart. So during our work together and in this journey, I realized, heart feelings was kind of difficult for me because that's where I had a history. And then kind of always blaming my mind. It's like, oh, just shut up. Like always trying to solve everything with the mind. And so it almost became the bad guy. The mind became the bad guy. But actually, what I realized after is, well, that's not a good way to treat myself either, because that is where my power is. It is in my mind. And so giving that power back to my mind, while of course also, looking more into the sacral and the heart, but really realizing also that it has a place, especially in the business building as well. So really realizing that maybe also for yourself, it's like, well, just because we're going to a more intuitive business or way of doing business doesn't mean that the mind is not going to play anymore. The mind is super important in business building and all of this self-discipline and everything.
And we'll talk about that too with the third eye, the brow chakra as well.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Let's move on to the heart. Obviously, it's at the heart, but tell us a bit more.
So in my research, in my contemplation, what I uncovered is the heart is so powerful and in so many ways, but this invites us to look at how we're experiencing love and also feeling a sense of appreciation for, the value that we're creating in the world, which ties in business a lot around pricing and what we're paid and what we ask to be paid. So when we tune into the fact that, especially if you think of them building on one and another. So we're just coming off of the solar plexus, and it's like, create these amazing programs that help people solve the problems that they're dealing with. Pretty simple. That's business in a nutshell. When you come into the heart, you're thinking about, well, what do I price this? How do I make sure that the value that I am transferring from my knowledge and expertise and products to the client is appropriate for the value that they're getting out of it? Mm-hmm. And that's one of many things that unfolds as we tune into the heart chakra.
Yeah, it's so interesting how pricing kind of points its nose everywhere. It's such an important topic. So in a way, again, it starts with the self-love and the feeling worthy. I think that's really where, everything starts, right? Because if you don't have that, it's very, very difficult to build a business.
Mm-hmm. Interesting that this is a feminine. So like the sacral chakra, we were talking about feelings. Here we're talking about love. We're talking about being appreciated. We're talking about pricing. Mm-hmm. Funny that women, I think it has a lot to do with just, thousands of years of cultural conditioning that we are taught it's better to give than to receive, for example. That's not true. Like that was something that was created maybe by the churches to get us to give more money than this goes deep, folks, but that's not how we want to live our business. Like our business depends on us being able to appropriately charge for the value that's being created. And that means that we've got to understand what is the value that's being created in the products and services that I create. Mm-hmm. And if the value isn't high enough to support my business, then maybe I have to go create a different offer and a different configuration so that it does turn into a very thriving, profitable business that takes care of my clients, they're happy, and also takes care of myself as the producer.
Yeah, it's that whole topic of underselling that we also talk about in gentle marketing, because unfortunately, a lot of heart-centered, and it's funny, they're called heart-centered entrepreneurs, right? And they are struggling, I think, with this heart chakra because, like you said, they're very good at giving, and the receiving part is where the struggle is. And so, really understanding that you need to create a sustainable business because otherwise, eventually, you'll just burn out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is, when you think of ideas that I talk about, prosperity, abundance, if you don't figure this one out, it's not easy to be living in abundance. This is very, very important work that is worth all the time and energy and testing that you put into it. And feedback, partnership. Like, I always love it because immediately when people think, well, okay, what should I price this at? And then we'll go out to the people that we're trying to sell it to, and they're so biased by their feedback back to us. It's not the most helpful way. Like, the most helpful way to test pricing is to actually do it and see what happens. And going back to the root chakra, we talked about fear of failure. This is where your root chakra and your heart chakra are working together, because you got to get over the fear of failure to be able to test different prices and be like, I'm going to go for it and see what happens. This feels good to me. Let's see what happens. Maybe the price isn't going to work out exactly what you thought. But if we're not trying different things, it's hard to know if we're in the right place. And again, I think our tendency is to underprice. And so the testing is in, well, what is it? Would somebody pay this for, this service? And the only way you find out, this is why, especially those of us who work in private coaching, we do one-on-one work. Just because you charge one person one thing doesn't mean that you can't change your price the next day and try something else.
I agree.
And that's one way.
Yeah. There's different schools of thought, but I agree. I also agree that client A might have different means than client B. And so it doesn't mean that you have to have the same price for everybody, right? Some people are like, oh, but that's not fair that one person is paying more than the other person. Well, actually, that is fair, because then, whoever has more means, they also pay more. That's how taxes work. At least if they work, they work. So I think that's totally fair. And you're right, kind of, testing things out. But it's also interesting that you said, refer back to the root and said, afraid of failure, because on your diagnostic map under the heart, it's not afraid of failure, but afraid of rejection. Mm-hmm. And that is just way, I don't know, it's just a different level, and it goes straight to the heart again, right? Mm-hmm. Where failure is kind of this business sense. Yeah, okay, I'm afraid to fail. But being afraid to be rejected, and that has to do with pricing, because if someone says, I can't afford that, that's in a way a rejection. Or if you just get no, participants or whatever, then you also feel rejected. So there's a lot of things going on in that heart chakra for sure.
Yeah. I love the book, Rejection Proof by Jia Zhang. I met him several years ago, and he went on a mission to become rejection proof. And he came up with all these crazy ideas of things that he would ask other people, thinking that they would reject him. He was looking for a rejection because he's trying to master, the comfort that eventually he was hoping would come. And one day he had like a soccer ball, and he went up to somebody's house, and he doesn't know this person at all. And he says, "Can I play soccer in your backyard?"
That's great.
And the person
said, yes, sure.
They did. I mean, and he didn't explain things. He just totally silly stuff. Like, he'd ask a police officer if he could drive their police car. he went to Krispy Kreme donuts and asked them to make a special shape. I can't remember if it was Olympic rings or an infinity symbol. And they were like, okay, we're going to figure this out. And he's like, wait a minute, like he learned about incredible kindness, and just surprising things about human nature that people also have trouble saying no. Mm-hmm. So there's another thing that's playing out too, which is really funny. And some people just love to help, so it's so much more. So scarcity says it's rejection. It just gives you one answer that if they say no to this pricing and this offer that I give to people, it's gonna be a reflection about me, and they're rejecting me and they don't like it. Scarcity says that. But in reality, prosperity says there's like 5,000 reasons why that person might be saying no in this moment. And most of them have nothing to do with you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But again, that comes back to feeling worthy. And so if you don't have that, then that's why you think all these other reasons. Yeah. One other thing that I think in this new business world, the conscious client will make buying decisions also not only with the mind, but much more also with the heart. So, from left brain decisions, which is how much it costs, right? That's kind of like facts, right? How much does it cost? Can I afford it? But then now we're bringing much more this right brain thinking in as well. And that's where the heart or the gut, we say, he decided by his gut, the intuition comes in. And I think that's really important to understand in gentle marketing and kind of also with this idea in your head, okay, the rejection. But again, it's not just a price where people decide, where people make a decision. And so in all of your copy and your emails and all of that, your heart needs to speak also to your ideal client.
It really does. There's so much here that comes to mind. I'm having breakthroughs even just as I hear you talk about it, that we are trying to communicate an energy through all of those things that you're talking about, right? In business, we're trying to communicate an energy. And I think that for many of us, and this is where I think gentle marketing can take more time and you have to be more patient, in that we're putting out an energy field for the world to interact with, and trusting that the more we're truthful about that energy field that we're creating from our heart out to the world, the more the people who are drawn to that are going to find it and say yes to it. And that might take longer, right? Because there's no manipulation. There's nothing but love coming through. This is how I help you. This is what I want to do if you're resonating with it. And I think about this past 6 years, and I'll tell you, we have to be very careful about not applying these new principles of conscious marketing to our business and then judging it based on the old methods. Yes. Because it is a recipe for disaster. And I've had to help myself through this many times. So I'm speaking from the experience here that it takes time for people to feel into what it is we're creating, why it's different. And there are many people out there that need to go do the old thing, listen to the hype, get promised the quick results, all the stuff that has been done out there in marketing, to be able to come to a place of understanding, I don't want that anymore. I want someone who's a truth teller. I want someone who's going to tell me this is going to probably take a year or two to get where they want to be. Like, that's a very wise person who's probably had some hard knocks to get to that moment. So I'm just kind of saying this because these are things that I've had to talk about inside of my head over and over again, because just because we're putting it out there and it's full of love doesn't mean that we're going to have like massive success, because we're not using those techniques of coercion.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's, you're right. We're seeing this with our own business, right? Where every now and then we're like, but wait a minute, Sarah, you're talking about gentle marketing and you're telling people it's going to take time. So be patient yourself, be patient with your people. And same for you. You're talking about the chakras, but not everybody is ready for that. And so that's that is so true. It does take longer. And yes, we can talk about conscious clients all we want, but the truth is there is still people out there who are, yeah, they want the hype. Actually, they want the quick results. And like you said, probably in 5 years from now, they'll be like, oh, this is not working, let me find something else. And then they'll be ready for something different.
I like the idea of funnels because funnels help me explain some of this stuff too, where we mentioned earlier, we're talking about pricing and we're talking about the idea that different people can afford different things. And when I think about a funnel and I think about how I've built a business where people can come in at lots of different price points and then be nurtured. So maybe they aren't ready for my business coaching, but they are ready for a more low cost solution. Mm-hmm. Because they are interested in this chakra work. They want to do some work around scarcity, but they're not ready to, work with me as a business coach, for example. So pricing is part of the way that the funnel works for me. I use it as a consciousness funnel. Like some folks only see the value of what we're talking about here to be a few $100s. And so if I am able to provide them a solution for a few $100s and they can come into the experience with me, that's awesome. And I think that this isn't always the way that other people are teaching us about business, but I have seen plenty of examples of people coming in for like $99 or $199. And then at some point in the future, coming and spending $5,000 with me. And that goes against what we often think is possible. But there's a deepening of the relationship that happens as they come in and they start to interact with my material.
Yeah. The word I started to use, and I have to thank my friend Jenny for that, is the word path instead of funnel. It's just a nicer image if you think about a path and you give people different options to, take different paths. Where a funnel, it still feels like you're putting everybody through the same funnel. And so what you described is actually a path because you give them different options, right?
Totally.
So yeah. Let's come back to the heart chakra, and maybe you can just share some things, some tips and advice where people can get started to, maybe this is, again, as we said, it's less of the doing. So maybe it's less pragmatic things, less like, here's your to-do list, but more of the being advice. Where can people start with this heart chakra?
I think that one of the ways I like to learn about the heart chakra and giving and receiving and being able to make sure that pricing is in alignment with the value created is masterminding with other people, talking about what are they charging for things, what value are they giving in exchange for that. Right. And then tuning into the intuition, the authority center. We're not talking about it here, but I use human design a lot in tuning into what is my authority center. For me, it's my emotional center. And I will go out and do research and talk to people and ask people about what they're charging. And then I will tune into my emotional center to help me see what is it that makes sense for me. And where just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean that they're in alignment with it. They're still maybe working through it. But right. That's where the emotional center can help me see like, oh, that person's probably not charging enough for the value they're getting. but it helps me kind of see where some of the challenges I might be dealing with. So it's like you're going on a quest, you're going on a journey, like a hero's journey. And the heart chakra is all about story. So like, as you hear other people's stories about how they came to their pricing, it helps you understand the story of how you got to the pricing that you are charging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's very good to, again, be in communion, be in partnership in order to go deeper into your story, because often, very often, the pricing starts with some kind of money blockage. And again, maybe we should just mention your book, The Mindful Millionaire, because that's really that individual journey for everything money related. So I think that will definitely also help with all of the chakras, but especially when it comes to business building with the heart chakra.
Yeah. And that's the feedback that I'm getting from folks, is they're having lots and lots of breakthroughs around these blockages that have appeared in their life. In many cases, they didn't even know they were there.
Yeah. I think most people probably don't have the awareness that they're there. Yeah. Mm. Wow, this has been fascinating again. Next week, we'll talk about the throat and the third eye, or the brow. So just want to mention the links again, sarahsnancroce.com/Lisa, Leisa. And your website is the Wealth Clinic. And yeah, I look forward to speaking again next week, Lisa.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Wonderful. Yay.